Okay guys, welcome back to this tutorial in which we are going to be talking about how the front end and back end communicate in JavaScript. So in this tutorial, we are going to be understanding asynchronous JavaScript. We are going to be looking at how REST APIs help us communicate between the front and back end, that's our client and servers. So in this tutorial, you are going to learn about REST APIs, how you can structure your REST APIs. You are going to learn how to make HTTP requests from your front end to the back end. And you are going to see how an understanding of how the asynchronous nature of JavaScript can help you efficiently write better code. So we are used to using some libraries in the different frameworks we work with. For example, those who work with React, they use Axios most often, and those working with Angular, for example, are going to be using the HTTP client most of the times. So by nature, all these libraries perform this request in an asynchronous manner. So you need to understand what asynchronous JavaScript is all about and how they can effectively be used to write better code. So the first API is what we are going to be using in this tutorial or in this video, because it's the building blocks for making HTTP requests in JavaScript. But because it is asynchronous, the general concepts are going to carry across all these different frameworks and libraries that help you make HTTP requests. Okay, so you have got some client code written, your front end code, which actually is some code which you want to use to display products on your website. And in general, those products are going to be stored on your backend on the server side. And the way you display those products on the client side is by making an HTTP request to the backend. And that's by intermediary of what we call a REST API. So generally, the backend code is going to define an interface, which is a REST API, which you can use to make requests to get resources on the server, modify those resources, or perform different operations on those services on the server. So what I'm talking of is a case where, let's say, you want to display this kind of information on your front end. So these are different products. See that these products have an ID, for example, a description, and the title of the particular product. And there are many products. So these products are going to be stored on your backend, and your front end code is going to need to retrieve this data from the backend. So in general, we term these resources. So a particular resource, for example, books, can be one resource on your backend. So all the books which are in an array, and let's say, for example, you want to display them on your front end, you call this a resource. You can have other resources like products, which is another resource. For example, users can be another resource, and you can have many resources on your backend, and you need to be able to modify, get those resources, and perform different actions with those resources on your front end. So the way you do that is by using what we call these endpoints. So these endpoints are made available because you define a REST API. So the backend code is going to present a REST API which you can use to, at the level of the front end, to communicate with this backend and manipulate these different resources. So this REST API is basically permitting you to use HTTP methods. So it's basically an HTTP protocol which you are using to communicate with the backend. And you know that the HTTP protocol has different methods. It has the get, post, put, delete, and patch, some other methods. So let's take the first case, and that's when, let's say, you want to get the different books which are stored on your backend. So you want to get all the arrays of books in this array. So your backend server, which is your database also in this case, has all these books. You want to grab them. So you need this endpoint. You are going to make a get request from your front end using this endpoint. The backend domain name /books is going to get you all the books on the backend. And you can replace these books by users if you want to get all the users, or you can replace books here by, let's say, products if you want to get all the products. The next case, let's say you want to get a particular resource, that's a particular item from the backend. You see that you are going to append the /1 to the end of the books in this case. So when you put books /1, it's going to grab you the first book, the book with the ID 1 inside this books array, and it's going to return it to you. So this first one returns all the books, the next one returns a particular book. Okay, the next one is the post method, with the post is when you want to update, you want to add a new book to the books array or to your database. For, let's say, okay, if you want to add a new book, what you need to do is you have to make this post request to your backend, but you need to pass an array of books. Sorry, you need to pass this object that represents the particular book you want to add. So you see, in this case, you're saying you want to add a book with the name Farmer and an author, James Potter. So it's going to add this book to it. It's going to save this book in your backend as well. Then you have the put, which is used when you want to modify a particular item. So in this case, we're making a put to modify the book with the ID 1, which is the first book. So you want to modify this first book. You want to change the name from the hunter to the farmer, for example, and you want to change the author to Joe Marty instead of John Peters. So you pass this information and it's going to modify that book in the backend. Notice that in this case with the post, we didn't pass the ID. That's because the backend is going to create the ID for the new book which is being added. So it's going to increment the ID count and add a new book with that ID. And for delete, you just pass the ID of the book you want to delete after /books, and it's going to delete the book with that ID from the backend. So as front-end developers, you don't need to really care about how all this is implemented, but you need to understand how these RESTful endpoints are structured. You need to understand how these RESTful endpoints are structured with /books. Get to /books gives you all the books. Get to /books /1 or /any other ID is going to give you the book with that particular ID. A post with an object that has the what you want to precise is going to add the book that has this name and author to the backend. A put with the ID of the book you want to modify and the different properties is going to update the book with that ID on the backend, so it's going to update it. And a delete with the ID is going to delete that book with that ID on the backend. So as front-end developers, you just need to understand the structure, and what you need to do is you are going to be performing now the different HTTP requests, making the different calls from your front end, and the backend code is going to handle that. So that's what we are going to be explaining in this video, how all this is being processed at the level of the front end and how the front end can communicate with the backend. How an understanding of all of this with the asynchronous nature of JavaScript can also make you write better code. So generally, backend developers are going to write some code which is going to expose this RESTful API. So that the ones who are going to be implementing the actual logic for what is happening under the hoods with these different endpoints when you make requests to them from your front end. And the front end developer's job is just to make use of these different endpoints to grab those different resources from the backend, like get the books, update the books, manipulate the books by just using some HTTP requests from the front end. This is an example of a RESTful API. This one just gives you some dummy data, but the general ideas hold for any kind of REST API you are going to be interacting with. So you have different resources. As we saw here, we have /books is a resource. In this case, they tell you that there are 100 products. You have /cards. There are 20 cards, /users, /posts, /comments, /images. So you see that you can interact with all these different resources, meaning that you can get all books. You can get a particular book. You can update the book. You can delete the book. You can perform all kinds of operations on these resources which are stored on the back end from your front end by using those different endpoints the RESTful API exposes to you. So you have different routes here, which I was calling endpoints. You can either call them routes or endpoints, the same things. You see here that you have get to /products, which is going to give you all the products. You have get to /products /1 gives you a single product. You see that you can have all these different, you can perform them on all the different resources like cards, users, and posts, and it's going to behave in the same way. So let's take first of all a simple example. So let's say we want to grab all these books and all these products and display them on our front end. And we're going to start with this simple example just to see how to show you guys how to use asynchronous JavaScript and make some HTTP requests to the backend to display the data on your front end. So that's going to be really quick, and afterwards we are going to be diving into more complex examples where I'm going to show you how to change these different requests, to make multiple requests to get different multiple resources and optimize for performance on the front end also. So this simple example, first of all, is going to be just to grab the products and display them on your front end. So what we want to achieve is this. So grab all the different products and display them in these different divs, as you see here, with the product ID, the product description and title. So here we have, this is the body of our code, and here we just have a UL, which is the container that holds the different LIs. So the different LIs are actually what we see here. All of these are LIs, and they are inside the UL, which is the container. So we have our script here, which is our JavaScript. That is actually what performs the request to our backend. We just have some small styles here to make this LI to have a black border around it, make it to have some rounded corners, and give it some small margin and padding around it. Okay, if we go to our script, so the first thing I did was get the element, our UL element, where we are going to fit in the different LIs. So we are going to be populating this UL with the different LIs. So I'll grab the UL first of all and store it in this constant. Then we have the get products method is actually the method we are going to be calling to get the products from the backend. So we see this fetch, which is actually a JavaScript API, is built into JavaScript, and you notice the await in front of it. So we are fetching from this endpoint. So this is actually, as we saw, this is the domain name for the backend where the resource is stored, and you have the slash products, which is the resource. So you want to get products from this dummy JSON domain. You want to fetch the products from there, and we are awaiting. So we wait for the response. We'll get the response, which is stored in this constant. Response.json is actually going to pass the response to get us the JSON, the actual JSON, which we need to work with, and stored in this constant. JSON response.product is actually going to be the actual products property in that JSON response object. So if we try to console log, for example, we see here we are trying to console log products to see what we get. Notice here, this is the array of objects, and there are 30 products actually in this array. So that's the products here which we are displaying. We'll console log there. Okay, so what we do now is, after I've gotten the products from the backend, we iterate through the products using the for each. We iterate over the products, and we set the inner HTML of the UL. So at every iteration, we are appending this new string, this li string, to the already existing string with this plus equal to. So we're appending this li string to the already existing string. So at every iteration, when it goes from one product to the next, it's going to add the product's title, description, and ID to a particular li. Then for the next iteration, it takes the next product, adds its title, description, and product ID to the next li. So at the end of the day, we'll end up with an interface that looks like this, and that's just by using this simple code we have here. So that's actually how you make an HTTP request to the backend to get a certain resource. And let me demonstrate what I was explaining by the asynchronous nature of JavaScript. So when we call get products, notice this async in front of this method, telling us that this is an asynchronous method. So JavaScript is going to recognize that this method is an asynchronous method, meaning that any other function we call below this, or any other code that is going to run after this asynchronous method, is not going to be blocked by this method. So when this method is executing, all the code below it is also going to be executing, and this method is not going to block the code that is below it, meaning that the code below it does not need to wait for this method to complete before it starts executing. And that's what asynchronous nature is all about. If the code was blocking and was not asynchronous, any code which is written after this get products is going to need to wait for this method to complete its execution before it carries on. For example, if I say console log, I'm going to console log, let's see, after method call, and I save this. You notice that the after method call actually runs, is actually displayed before the products. It's actually displayed before our products, which we console log before it, of which the normal flow is that you'll be expecting that this get product should get called first, and the product should be displayed before the after method call is displayed. But in this case, you notice that since as this get products is actually an asynchronous method and is wasting time to execute, it's taking some time to execute. So JavaScript is going to go ahead and run the other code which is below it, and it's going to console log this after method call. And after it has console logged after method call, when the products are now returned, it can now display the products. And that's what the asynchronous nature of JavaScript helps you achieve. So it makes your code and your application to be really optimized, because you don't need to be waiting for methods that waste time to execute, or different events that are going to take time to execute before the other code execute. Once an event finishes execution, it can return its value at any point in time while all the other code in your program is going ahead and executing. So there's another thing I wanted to explain was how to really change these different asynchronous requests together. Let's say we want to get multiple resources, and in addition to getting products, we want to also get let's say users, and we want to get different posts. So you could do all this fetch here. Let's say, for example, we want to say fetch get resources. So we want to get multiple resources. Get resources. So what you can do is you can come here actually and have different response for the different resources. Like you can have here let's say you call this one response 1, response 2, response TV. Then you call this one products, you call this one post, you call this one users, you call this one users. So you have these 3 different responses, and you have the JSON, you have their different JSON responses here as well. You just call them JSON response 1, JSON response 2, JSON response TV, response 1.json response 2, response TV. Okay, then you have now the different resources which are going to be returned here. The first one is products, the next one is post, the next one is users, post, users. And you can console log the different resources here now. This one is post, and this one is users. Get resources out here. If you call this get resources method, you notice what's happening here is that we are going to be waiting for all these different requests to happen at separate times, meaning that when this method get resources is called, inside the method, the first response with the await here means that this is actually blocking, and so response 1 must be returned before response 2. The fetch for response 2 is executed and response 2 is returned, and response TV2 is going to need to wait for this first 2 to execute and complete before it can get this response. So this is actually blocking, and if we save and take a look, we'll notice that post is displayed first, products is displayed first, afterwards post, then afterwards we get the users, because it's actually happening in that order, and we're getting the TV of them in that order. So here is 1, here is 2, and here is TV. Save. If we take a look, so that's what you notice. You notice that products is returned first, as we saw. So you have to wait for products to get returned first of all before you can console log products. After, the next request is to get the post, and everything has to wait and the post is returned. Then finally we have the users, which is returned last. So this is actually fine in cases where you want this order to be maintained and you don't want to proceed making a next request until you have gotten the previous request. This is totally fine. But in cases where you want to optimize for performance and you notice that these requests are completely independent from each other, like we have in this case, the posts have nothing to do with the products. It's not as if when we grab a particular product, we need to use the ID of that product or a particular attribute on that product to get the post. These requests are completely independent and you like them to execute at the same time without blocking one another. You want them to execute completely separately. So the way you can achieve that is by separating them into their own separate asynchronous methods. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate all these different resources into different methods so that I can call them and use the asynchronous nature of JavaScript to ensure that the one that finishes its execution first returns its response immediately, and I can work with it while the others are still performing their request, or the others are still returning their own response. So I'm just going to duplicate this. I'm going to have a similar method but for individual resources. So here is going to just be to fetch response for products. The first response, console of products. For this one, get products. I'll have a similar method for getting now the post. So I'm going to delete this one, call it get post. So I have get products, get post, and finally the last one, get is to get the users. Get users. So I can put it below here. I like. Can now have our get resources method, and this get resources method, instead of doing the fetches individually, is going to call those methods. So I'm going to be calling here get products, get post, and get users. And this way of doing it is very important because you can do this actually in any framework. You must not just be in vanilla JavaScript. You can do it with React, with Angular, and an understanding of how to change these different asynchronous requests this way is going to actually help you achieve the desired effects you want. So you notice that here I'm calling the get products method without using the await in front of it, because I know if I use the await, it's going to need to all the other methods after it are going to need to wait for this first one to execute before they can execute. But if I call them this way by just calling the get products without an await in front of it, I call get post and I call get users, all of them are synchronous methods and none of them is blocking the other one, meaning that all of them are going to execute at the same time, and the one that returns its response first, that's good and fine. We can work with the response it returns. So if I save now, what do we notice? You notice that we have products, post, and users, but in this case it's different because if products was to waste time to come with its response, if products was to waste time to return its response, post is going to return its response and the execution is going to continue. So here no one is blocking the other, and I can demo this by let's say inside this get products method I'm going to put a timer which is going to waste some time before the next one executes. So I'm going to put all of this in a set timeout so that it wastes some time and the others can execute. Set the timeout of, let's say 2 seconds, then I'll put the rest of the code inside. And now here, since as this is await, you notice that I'm forced to use async here, async, because I'm forced to use async there. So this get products method is called first. Actually what we are doing is we are calling it first, but it's going to take more time to execute because we have added a set timeout into it. But because this method is non-blocking, these are synchronous methods and they are non-blocking, I've not used the await in front of here, in front of the get products. So since as this get products is going to be wasting an additional time of 2 minutes to return its response, the get post and get users are going to go ahead and get execute and return their own response before the get product response is returned. If I save this and we take a look, notice now that we have our posts, we have our users before we have our products, and that actually took the additional 2 seconds to return its own result. If I refresh and we take a look again, notice we have the post, the users, then the products comes. And that's very interesting with the asynchronous nature of JavaScript, understanding how this asynchronous nature can actually help us achieve our desired effects. We have here being able to run different asynchronous methods and having an understanding of the order in which they are going to get executed, and that's really helping us optimize for performance and not having to unnecessarily wait for one request to return the response before we execute the other request. I think I'm going to go ahead and end this video here. So guys, that's it. If you like this video or you got some value from it, don't forget to leave your like and a comment if you didn't understand something below, and subscribe as well to this channel for more videos like this, and I'm going to see you in the future.